Hi guys, we're back again, and this video we're going to be talking about how to modify different types of science activities for students with special needs. Just keep in mind that a lot of these accommodations, modifications that I'll be showing you in the video can also be used for EL students and for any at-risk students that you might have who are really just struggling and need a little bit of extra support. Okay, so the first part of this video, I'd like to go over some accommodations and modifications that I make for science labs. Labs are a big part of science class, and they can be pretty overwhelming for kids with special needs. And we want to avoid frustration, we want to avoid anxiety as much as we can. So I like to do something that I call prepping the labs ahead of time. The first thing that I do is I take a look at the worksheet or the lab sheet that the students are going to be expected to work on, and I like to prep it ahead of time. For this particular lab, this was a density lab that students had to do with 6 different types of blocks that were made of different substances. And as you can see, I'm giving them a list of the substances. It's not a secret. I'm not expecting them to figure that out. But they do have to figure out, based on the mass and the density and the volume, which substance matches which block. So I am still expecting them to do some higher order thinking, but again, I'm kind of giving them that word bank to help them out. The other thing I did to prep was I numbered the blocks here 1 through 6. That's a small detail, and I know that seems kind of silly, but for special needs kids, they do miss those small details. And then if you miss something like that and don't get that on your paper, that can impact you later, and it can mess up your final calculations. So I try to prep as much as I can for this. Okay, if I turn the page, you'll see there's data analysis and those types of things. But what we have here is a data table that the kids will be asked to fill out. And as you see here, I've actually put some little notes to the kids. They're going to use the same cube for this. That would have been something that was confusing. And also telling the kids when they're using the scale, they're going to put the cubes side by side. Again, it seems like a small little piece of information that seems pretty insignificant, but it is pretty important to the final outcome of the science lab. I've also included the prompting with labels for mass and volume and density. Again, we're trying to get kids to get used to doing that and to get comfortable with it. And at this point in the lab, they're not, and so we're using that as a prompting measure to kind of help them to get into the habit of using those labels. And then if there's ever any graphs that kids have to complete, I find that it's really beneficial to label the graph ahead of time, if possible, unless that's something that they're specifically going to be scored on. It's just a detail that it sort of helps to alleviate anxiety if we can already kind of have that information filled in correctly, so that they just need to plot the data and the points. Another example of a lab that we do is a mass lab. And as you can see here, I've given some information. I'm telling the kids their answer needs to be 2 places after the decimal point. This answer on the electronic scale needs to be 1 place after the decimal point. Again, it's a small detail, but it's important. That would be a set of directions the teacher might give orally, and they would miss that. So if you can put it on the paper, it really helps. And then, of course, down here, this information here, they're calculating the mass of the water, and this is going to require some calculation. So I like to tell the kids, okay, when you're filling these 2 out here, you're actually going to subtract these 2 numbers for you to get this final answer. And so that's what we have the arrow pointing to that direction. Again, it's giving them a little bit of extra support so that they can complete that calculation correctly. Whenever there's questions that come from the textbook, I just go ahead and put page numbers on there for the kids. Especially if it's quite a long chapter. They seem to spend all their time searching for things in the chapter, and again, we just want to alleviate the anxiety, and we want to try to keep this from taking longer than it needs to. On the back here, I gave them some hints as to where they could find the information or what they need to do. I told them to use flashcards for this question. I'm giving them the formula for calculating their weight in pounds. I'm telling them to use their stair step for this question. Here's a page number. Use your stair step for this one. Again, giving them some formulas here to help them calculate. telling them again to use their stair step. So again, I'm leaving it up to the kids. They have to do the majority of the work by themselves, but again, I'm just giving them that little bit of extra support to help them feel confident. It also keeps them from becoming frustrated, but it also lets them have a little bit of independence as well. Another example of a lab, this was making a scale model of the Earth's interior. This was something that they did do as a whole class, which was fantastic. But again, there's a lot of steps to this, there's a lot of details, and special needs kids might miss out on those specific details that make it a little bit difficult. So at the front here, I'm going to go ahead and tell them in order to calculate this, they're going to divide by 70. And then over here, I'm telling them, okay, we want this in millimeters and centimeters. So I've split it in half, and I'm giving them room to go ahead and write that. And again, I'm not really concerned so much with labels. I'm concerned with, can you calculate this correctly? And then this part of the assignment, the students are actually using a compass to draw the different layers of the Earth. And this part can be very difficult if kids are not real used to using a compass, they're not real comfortable with it. And so I like to put notes here sort of telling them, okay, set the compass at 2 centimeters. Set the compass at 5 centimeters, set the compass at 9 centimeters. And that gives them a little bit of a heads up in order for them to be able to draw the circles that they need. And again, with anything like this where students are creating a diagram, I like to have an example ready so that if I flash that example at them, they can kind of see, oh, okay, I'm doing it right, I'm okay. And then I have a final product that I show them, okay, here's what you're expected to have at the end of the class. And so again, providing those models and examples are really powerful to help kids know that they're on the right track. The last lab I want to show you is the lab that we did on volume, and pardon my whiteout here. I'm trying to make this look not so ugly, but anyhow. Up here, this was a lab that had a lot of different stations. There was a lot going on here. And so in the first station, I went ahead and listed the specific materials the kids needed to have just to make sure that they had those. On this particular one here, we're going to be working with some formulas. And it's always helpful if you can sort of help the kids fill in pieces of that formula. Pi 3.14, and then the radius squared. And then over here, when they're filling in the information, I'm telling them, okay, well, if you have the diameter, to find the radius, you just take that and divide by 2. And I've got an arrow coming down pointing to that direction. And again, this question right here, the answer needs to be moved down to here. So that's what that arrow is indicating. I also drew some pictures of what radius looks like and what diameter looks like in case the kids forget that. We do have kids that have memory problems with long and short-term memory, so they're not going to remember those formulas. They're not going to remember the vocabulary terms necessarily, radius and diameter. So I just drew little pictures there to help them out. In this section right here, they're calculating the volume of a cylinder with water, and there's some subtraction that needs to happen. But again, it uses that term difference, and if I'm a kid that's not real comfortable with math, I may not know what difference means, and difference, of course, is telling me to subtract. So I've got that word subtract there, and I've got the arrow pointing down to let them know, okay, we're going to subtract these two values, and then we're going to put the answer here. And again, I did the same thing here. Telling them that this is the water displacement method. I'm telling them to fill the cylinder halfway, giving them some notes there to kind of help them along. Number 5, we just crossed that off because we were looking at what are the big ideas. Is that something that we absolutely need to know? So you'll notice on this particular lab, I did cross out a few things that I just felt like were not the most important for my kids. Things that might have been things that you might look at for more higher order thinking, but as far as a big idea, not something that's real important at this point. So I did cross out some of those points. And again, I have a page number there for any of the questions that might need to happen. And then again here I have a prompting for the kids to use their stair step. It just gives them that reminder, use your stair step to fill out that information. Now I want to talk about worksheets. And this really could be for any class. I'm just going to focus in on science because this is a science video. For this particular worksheet here, the kids have to fill in the blank with different terms. I find that this is really difficult for the kids to find this stuff, especially because you've got, they'd have to go back and look in the chapter. But what makes this particularly difficult too is that there's unscrambling of words there, and that's almost impossible for dyslexic kids or for kids who have visual perception problems. This would be really difficult. So what I do is I give them a word bank, and I just attach it to the worksheet so that they can see what their choices are, and that really seems to help. It's an easy accommodation that you can give kids, and it's very successful. On this particular worksheet, I provided page numbers for all of the questions. Again, it just prevents kids from having to hunt for everything, and it just cuts down on the amount of time it takes them to get this done. I also provided a word bank off to the side, which is very helpful as well. If they know what they're looking for and they have a page number, it makes it go much faster, and then they won't become frustrated. And they still can maintain that independence. This right here was a project that the kids did. They had to create a story about their pet rock. They picked one type of rock, metamorphic, igneous, or sedimentary, and they had to write a story from the viewpoint of the rock. And they had some words, vocabulary words that they had to include in this as well. This type of assignment, because they're only doing it once, and they didn't have a lot of practice with this, would be extremely difficult for special needs students. So one way that you can kind of help to modify that is by providing a writing prompt. Now this one is, there's different levels, but this one's a pretty heavy support for this particular assignment. We have the story constructed. There's a lot of fill in the blanks, but it sort of takes the kids through the rock cycle for the metamorphic rock, and then we do provide the word banks, so the kids have to find the space where the word goes, and that way they're still involved with the curriculum, they're still doing the assignment, but they're having a lot of support with it. Okay, the last part of the video I want to go over is just some accommodations, modifications that you can make for tests and quizzes. This is one example. If you have anything where the kids have to sort of list steps, if you have students that just can't remember those steps because of long-term or short-term memory problems, you can sort of have a structure set up for it, but then have spaces where they have to fill in part of the example. A lot of kids, if you give them part of the phrase, they can give you the rest of it. So that's what this is here. And then again, just providing that word bank so that kids have choices. Sometimes what I do also is I underline specific parts of the sentence that I want them to focus in on to help them to find the correct answer. Anytime you have memorization, rote memorization, that's going to be really difficult for some students who have, like I said, those long and short-term memory problems. Any kind of rote memorization is going to be a struggle. So this is an example of a modification we did with a quiz over some of the symbols that kids had to memorize from the periodic table. And the quiz, if I can sort of show you, the quiz would have been laid out a lot like this, where they basically had to match a big long list of terms with the symbols. And the way that we modified this, we still maintain the list, but if you notice, we've chunked the list up into sections. So everything in this section would match up with these symbols. And if you do it this way, it's going to be the same content, all of the same symbols they are expected to memorize, but as you notice, it's going to be a lot less frustrating, a lot less stressful, and a lot less overwhelming. And again, you're not really changing what they have to know. You're just changing how you're testing it or quizzing it. I want to show you some examples of how to modify a test. I've got 3 examples here of the same test. So I want to show you the original. This is a test over the metric system. As you can see, it's got quite a long list of matching. There's some measurement, there's some abbreviations that they need to know, and then they have some scientific notation, and then some fill-in-the-blank conversions, metric conversions, and then you have some rote memorization with Fahrenheit and Celsius. There is a question here for calculating density, and then you've got your multiple choice as well. So this can be quite daunting for special needs kids. So one version that I created for modification on this test is this version here. It looks very much like the version I just showed you. As you notice, I broke up the matching section into parts. I've chunked it so it's a little bit less overwhelming. But again, it's the same information. The measurement, I didn't do much with that. But if you notice here, I'm giving them a hint. I'm telling them, think about your stair step. What would your stair step say for these symbols? Okay, again, just giving them a little bit of support there. And again here, some of this question might be a little bit tricky. It's asking about the volume of a box and how much it can hold. And a lot of times when you're asking more than one question within a test question, kids will overlook that second little question that's in there. So the first question's there. I provided the, you can see the formula I provided for volume, so kids don't have to remember that. And then this question here, will the box be big enough? I want to make sure my students don't forget to answer that. So I've got yes or no here to remind them, oh yeah, there's another question there. Use your stair step. Here, I'm giving them a clue. If kids know that it's an irregularly shaped object, that's going to help them to remember how to find the volume. Okay, that's just a clue, and that would be something that we had talked about in class. So if they can remember that from class discussion and review, that will help them to answer this short answer question. If you notice here where it asks about density, I've provided the formula. Then we have some multiple choice. I will tell you that for multiple choice, I cut down the multiple choice to 3 choices. All of here, and then for these 2 questions, this was quite difficult. We cut it down to 2 choices, and then here we've cut down to 3 choices for the multiple choice. Now, for students that even find that daunting, I do have an even more modified version of the same test, and as you can see here, I did a lot of different things here. We made this, instead of a matching situation, I made it more of a multiple choice situation. And if you notice, I put all of the important details, the important words that I want them to know in bold print so that they're focusing in on those things. And I'm giving them 3 choices. Okay, so that's the first page there. I changed this up a little bit because this student who would be taking this particular test, they would really need that stair step in front of them. So I give them an opportunity to fill in their stair step, and then they can use this on the rest of the test. So it's a legal way to kind of keep it all on the up and up, where kids can use that stair step because they've actually filled it in as part of their test. So again, I have some multiple choice, 3 choices here, and again, using your stair step. So I'm providing them with the stair step, they have to fill it in, but then I'm also directing them to use the stair step to answer these questions. And when I was making this test, I really was looking at what is the most important information for these particular students, and I really focused in on very specific facts that are more like life skills facts: gallons, quarts, pints, feet and yards, pounds, ounces, anything that they would need for cooking, anything that they would need for home improvement, working around the house, length and width, area, volume, perimeter, those types of things. For this one, I'm giving them the choices that they need to fill in, and again, I'm putting it in bold print so they can't miss it. These last 2 questions are calculation questions, so I'm giving them space to put their formula, and then I'm giving them a space for their calculations. And as you notice here, I'm telling them to use the formula, and then I'm also providing the volume and the mass, but again, I'm doing it in bold print so they can't miss it. It stands out. Again, providing those formulas is really important. And then the last portion of this test, I just wanted them to practice and demonstrate that they can measure with a ruler in centimeters and millimeters. Again, that's a really important life skill, and so that would be something that I would prioritize and would put on this particular test. So again, this third one would be pretty heavily modified from the original. The last thing I just want to show you real quickly before we finish up is again, providing notes for kids. Kids are expected to take notes in class, and that's really important, and we want to expect kids to do that. We want to continue to make that an expectation, but sometimes for whatever reason they're struggling to keep up with the notes, or they get a little bit of anxiety because they want to make sure they have everything. So my students are expected to take notes, but then I also provide them with my own set of notes after class so that they can fill in with whatever they need, and then we can make sure that they're still maintaining some independence, but we're still providing some support to make sure that they have all the notes that they need for the test. So this would be an example of notes I would provide. And then the last thing with science too, there's such a tremendous amount of vocabulary that we want students to know, and a lot of times it's really important to practice that vocabulary prior to a test. Quizlet is a fantastic website that you can use to create practice activities for vocabulary. You can do flashcards, the kids can play matching games, there's all sorts of things that they can do there. And the great thing about Quizlet is it will also find images for you. So you'll have the word, the definition, and the picture that goes along with it. So this is an example of a Quizlet with some vocabulary that we actually printed off. And I know that my colleague, Ms. Hoover, she gives this to her students as well to take home so that they can use it as a study aid. So again, another great opportunity for students to have that little bit of extra support. That's about all we have for you on modifying for science. Thank you for watching, and we hope this helps.